Everyone, welcome. I'm Dr. Judith Fogel, Yoetzet Halacha. I have a PhD in sexology, and I'm a sexuality counselor. I'm the program director for the training of the Madrichot Kalot at the Eden Center, and I'm an experienced Kala teacher myself. We're so happy to be sponsoring this evening called What's Your Position? The Normal in Sexuality, Sexual Positions, and Ask the Experts. A little bit about the Eden Center. The Eden Center works to improve the experience of the mikveh and promote the spiritual, emotional, and physical health of Jewish women and families, and provides intimacy education for different stages of marriage. I would like to start with a disclaimer. The therapists in tonight's webinar are all from and will be sharing suggestions in that context. With regard to personal practice, speak to your halachic authority if you have any questions. We are inviting you to send comments privately to our host, Dr. Naomi Grummet, the director of the Eden Center, who will then be passing the questions on to me. At the end, we will display the panelists' phone numbers and emails, and if you would like to speak to any of the panelists further, they would be happy to do so. And now let me introduce the panelists. First, we have Dr. David Ribner. He is the founder and director of the Sex Therapy Training Program, the School of Social Work at Bar Ilan University, and is certified as a sex therapist in Israel and the U.S. He is in private practice as a sex and marital therapist in Jerusalem for decades and has authored 2 books on the subject, of which his most recent, released this year, co-authored with Tali Rosenbaum, I Am for My Beloved. Lizzie Rubin. Welcome, David. Lizzie Rubin is an individual, couple, and sex therapist with special training in abuse, postpartum depression, pre-weds, and newlyweds. She directs Eden Center's Mikveh Tenzin course programming in Israel and abroad. Welcome, Lizzie. Next, we have Jody Wachpress. She is the founder of the Oasis Center and specializes in marital and family therapy and couples and sex therapy. She is currently pursuing her doctorate in clinical sexology. Welcome, Jody. And now, here are the questions for tonight. One more time, just to repeat those people who came on, we are really trying to be addressing your questions throughout this program. So please, please, please send us your questions to Dr. Naomi Grummet. Let us begin. Our first question is, what is normal in sexuality? Lizzie, would you like to start this one?
Sure, thank you so much. And again, thank you to the Eden Center for creating this forum that we could be open and talk about things that are really not talked about anywhere else in such a way. And I think that the openness that we're trying to bring to everybody should be helpful, and that's our point. That's what we'd like to do. So the question is, what's normal in sexuality? Well, there's 2 parts to this question. I think that what's normal is that when 2 people care for each other, want to be with each other, are attracted to each other, and look forward to sharing their sexual experience together. But I'm not so sure that that's the question that we're trying to ask tonight. I think you're asking tonight, what's normal? Positions, how many times is normal? That's pretty much going to be the topic of the night. So I'd like to say this, I wish I could give you statistics. I wish I could tell you numbers, situations, but everybody's so different. We have different people, different marriages, different personalities. So there isn't one answer, what's normal. There isn't a one size fits all. Some people like chocolate, some people like vanilla, and I think some people like bubble gum and pizza. Okay, so everybody has different tastes, but there's a few guidelines, what's normal, and I think that what's really important and normal is consent and negotiation. That 2 people, whatever they think is right for them, that both sides agree, that they both feel comfortable with that. And if someone wants to push someone else's comfort zone, there can be negotiation, they talk about it, they have the right to say no, but a person can always ask, and they can always try once, see if it's good for them. And I think that just makes life more interesting when there's negotiation. So other than that, normal just means the two of you enjoying each other in whatever way it is.
Thank you, Lizzie. Are there any other comments on the question? No? Okay. Let's go to
Judith, just one moment. I just want to just clarify that sometimes people confuse normal with legal, and those are not the same thing. The law may take a stance on some particular sexual activity, like adults having sex with minors, but that has nothing to do whether that behavior is considered to be normal or not. We operate within the law, and that's underscore what Lizzie said. Within that, the factors that Lizzie listed here are, in fact, the issues that are the part of a couple's negotiation about what they think is appropriate for them.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go to question number 2. This is one that came up last time, so I just wanted to bring this in for this time also. We just didn't get a chance at this, and I thought it was an excellent question. In all aspects of my Jewish life, I'm a halachic Jew. I try to follow the halacha to the best of my abilities and take extra precautions to be able to do so. I learned in yeshiva that lichatchila, we should have sex in the missionary position, and b'di'eved, it is okay to have sex in any other position. My wife only orgasms when she is on top. Every time we have sex in that way, we feel like we're not doing what we should be doing. Can you comment on that? Jody, do you want to take that one?
Sure. First of all, these are I love that people ask these questions, because I think there are so many people that have these questions and don't ask them. So thank you for whoever sent that message, that question in, and I hope we do a good job answering. There's a really big difference between what we learn in seminary, midrasha, yeshiva, than what we're faced with in real life, in reality. There's certain things that we can learn and we internalize a certain way, and then as we get older, as we go through life, as we go from being newlyweds to being married for a few years, to go into getting jobs, losing jobs, school, kids, things are going to change. And halacha is halacha. The way we understand halacha and apply halacha a lot of times is going to vary with your needs, which is why, as we said, as Judith said at the beginning of this podcast, webinar, we need to continue this conversation, both halachically, which we're not doing here, but you can listen, Judith has given a couple of classes on that, and also relationally, both our relationship with ourselves and what we feel comfortable with, and our relationship with our spouse. So I'd like to, first of all, the fact that you've tried different things and felt that on the one hand, there was sexual satisfaction for your wife, that she was able to orgasm in a position that's not missionary, that means that there's play involved in sex. Now, it sounds like there's guilt attached to that, which is something that's not always so healthy. The fact that you're asking about it is healthy. It means it was a light went on above your head, and you said, this is something that I really need to look into. So, a lot of times things are going to depend on what feels good. Like Lizzie said, my words aren't coming out well. Like Lizzie said, what feels good between the two of you? That's what Judaism is about. That's what sexuality within Judaism is about. It's about intimacy. It's about feeling good with one another. It's about feeling comfortable with one another. And again, what a lot of people learned in yeshiva or in your wife's kala classes, you can't cover everything in these classes. And the most important thing to take away is to ask questions. Just like when we learn about bidikot, we learn about taharat mishpacha, we say, over and over again, you need to learn how to ask the questions and feel comfortable asking the questions, and find someone that you feel comfortable asking the questions to. If it's a halachic authority, if it's a mental health professional, the Eden Center has an array of professionals that are happy to help you, and continue your education. We're talking about different positions are very helpful for a lot of people when we talk about different sexual positions, because some people will only be able to feel sexual satisfaction in certain positions. When a woman is on top, she may have more control over the rhythm. and that may make her feel more comfortable. So maybe that's why she's able, that could be one reason why she's able to orgasm in that position. It could be physiologically, there's a reason. And it's important to be able to explore, and it's important to learn that exploration is healthy. We had talked in the past when this question had come up about how one person's, and tell me if I'm getting this right, Judith, how one person's lechatchila can be someone else's b'di'evet, and how sometimes one person's b'di'evet can be someone else's lechatchila, which means that it's personal, it's not tailor-made. We need to learn how to be experimental and try and see what feels good, because that's the point of healthy sexuality within the context of Judaism. And I would love to hear if anyone else has something to add to that, because it's a great question.
Just a historical note on where the term missionary position came from, which may in fact impact on people's comfort with it. It came from the fact that the Christian missionaries who were in South America and Africa told people that the only position that Jesus said was okay was when the man is on top and the woman is on the bottom. And that is the only reason that it's called a missionary position. So if that makes any difference in terms of people's comfort level, let's say, with maybe perhaps doing something else, then I just add that as a note.
And I'd like to add also that recently this topic came up with a group that I was teaching, and I just wanted to get on, just make sure that the person that I asked, my halachic authority, was on par with me. And I asked about the positions, and he said that a woman needs to get pleasure. Okay, the lechatchila is for a woman to feel good. Okay, this is the man's mitzvah. He has to make sure that he gives her pleasure. It works both ways too, but it is mitzvat ona, is that he is in charge of giving her pleasure. So if this is what gives her pleasure, that's the lechatchila. And she can't be without it. If another position doesn't give her pleasure, there's no point. There's no point in doing something that she doesn't like. If she likes it, fine. But I think that positions are something that people like to see what will give them the maximum pleasure. And that's why it's okay. And it's good to figure out how to maximize your fun.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to add on, based on my doctoral studies, I did a survey of sexual practices within the bedroom of Orthodox Jewish heterosexual women. And one of the statistics that came up was that 90% of the women surveyed, I'm talking about, people who filled out the survey, was like over 1,000 women filled out the survey, and we used the statistics from over 650 people. And at the end of the day, 90% of them had sex in various positions, and only 10% had sex in the missionary position. So I just think, just in terms of outlook, in terms of where Orthodox Jewish women are today, I think it's important that these people know that they're not in the minority, that it is, one of the things that we know with all the information regarding sexuality today is that some women do feel more pleasure, when they are on top. And if that's the way that she orgasms, very much like everyone else had said, so then that should be their lechatchila. Okay. With that, I just want to move on to the next one. Question number 3. How do we learn about different positions for sex? Okay, who wants to take that one? Dr. Ribner?
Sure. I think, first of all, people need to have some sense that there's no expectation that couples will use, 10 or 15 different sexual positions. By and large, couples will have a small number of sexual positions that they feel comfortable with, that they will know is within their expected norms of behavior. And the option for other kinds of sexual positions is always available. And it's not hard to find that information. I think that we will be putting up on the screen here some options for that. But I think if anybody is interested in knowing where they can get some more concrete information about options with regard to various sexual positions, they should feel free to contact me or contact any of my colleagues here, and we will be able to point them in the right direction. It is important, though, to keep in mind that this should be something that's agreed upon in advance by both members of this couple. It's not something that one should necessarily introduce into the physical intimacy that this couple is enjoying with each other. without first beginning to understand what the implications or the feeling of this might be for the partner who is involved with here. So it does involve some discussion. And also keep in mind that it's like any other kind of physical activity. You may not get it right the first time or the fifth time. If it's something that people want to incur as part of their sexual repertoire, then it will take a certain amount of practice and a certain amount of moving on from one time to the next. And of course, a sense of humor always helps us along if it doesn't seem to be going smoothly the first time. So yes, sexual positions are available. You won't find a tremendous variety. There are some people who, if we're talking about sexual intercourse, about penis-vagina intercourse, we're talking really about a basic 6 sexual positions and perhaps some alternatives. If you move around to other areas like oral sex, then that will increase the number of potential options that you have with regard to this. So people should feel comfortable if they feel that doing some experimentation is where they are in terms of the development of their physical intimacy, by all means. And there are legitimate sources to learn about these without feeling they might see something that they might feel to be is inappropriate.
Yeah, I wanted to add one thing about it's sort of like a different looking at it from a different population. That when we talk about different positions, we're talking about different positions for able-bodied people, and we also need to address different positions for people with different physical disabilities, people with certain pains. You know, if someone has a broken leg, you know, you're going to have to get a little creative. If someone has a bad back, these are things that happen, you know, those are things that happen all the time. You know, you don't have to just stop being sexually intimate because, you know, you broke your leg or you broke your arm. You want to try to understand how you can negotiate that. There are people with chronic illness and specific physical disabilities, and there are definitely resources for specific positions that will be able to help them. You also, you know, want to talk about people that have experienced some sort of trauma in their life, and you want to be able to have non-threatening positions that will be more inviting. So there's a lot to say about positions, and I really would encourage people to, first of all, yes, Bezrat Hashem, we're going to be able to link you into a few different sources and find what feels comfortable for you, because I can say as a sex therapist, someone that's gone through, you know, a lot of training, there are certain things that still make me feel a little more comfortable than others. And everyone has to find what they're comfortable with. Again, sometimes you push the envelope a little bit just so that you can see if you want to go out of your comfort zone in order to learn certain things, but also be kind to yourselves. And if something doesn't feel comfortable for you, that's okay. That's okay too.
Thank you.
Okay.
Lizzie.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, just like to build on what Jody was saying, that like the most important, there are so many different types of people that have different needs, but I just want to put it out there that a lot of people look for different positions to find the ultimate pleasure. What's really important is that the couple are just enjoying themselves, okay? The position is not necessarily the thing that is going to give them the ultimate pleasure. The ultimate pleasure is how they love each other, care for each other, give to each other, and that really is, I think is more of the main focus. I mean, I have no problem, and I think it's great when people experiment and try all different kinds of things, but to keep that in mind, that it isn't the position that's going to give you the pleasure, but it's the feeling that you have together. That's the ultimate.
Such a nice idea. Thank you. I was teaching a Kala this past week, and we were talking about sex for the first time, and we were offering different positions. So I asked her, what positions do you know about? Like, what can you name? And the only thing that she came back to me was a position that is a little bit obscure and out there, and she learned about it from Cosmo. She's like, yeah, I was reading Cosmo with my friends over the weekend, and they were talking about this position. That's the one that I know. And I think that's one of the things that we have to do a little bit of filtering, that realize that there are some places such as Cosmos, such as, different websites that are out there that sometimes are trying to like push our limits, which are fine. Like if you want to do that, that's fine. But you realize that sometimes they're just out there to like try to, give a lot of variety. And sometimes people have to start, as you know, Dr. Ibner said, with like the 6 basics with variations and then move out to there. So I think it's also about the comfortability of, or the comfort of the couple and where they are within their relationship. You know, in the beginning of the marriage, you might try certain things, and later on, you might try other things. Okay.
And
Yeah, go ahead.
am I the only one around here that doesn't know what Cosmo is?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. Cosmopolitan magazine. It is a magazine. I was like,
That I know. Cosmopolitan, let's go.
do you want me to state the position that was in there? I don't know how far we're going with this.
Let's get on with our questions.
Text me afterwards. I'll tell you. Okay. What resources are out there for frum couples to learn about ways to spice up their intimacy? It's a follow-up question that just came in based on what we were just saying. We're looking for resources for frum couples. Clearly, Cosmo is not that. So what are some resources that we might have to spice up our intimacy? Jody, do you want to give us some?
Yeah, again, I think it's very individual. When I'm working with couples or with kalot, specifically, then I try to get an idea of what their comfort zone is. There's a YouTube that's called Sexplanations. She can, any of these places that you're going to look at are going to be about sex. So we just have to recognize that and swallow that pill. And that's, it's a YouTube videos. They're descriptive. I happen to think that some of those are more comfortable for people to see. There are some great books. I think that in Dr. Ibner's books, there are some great options there. If you go on, if you go online, and I'm sorry, didn't have this prepared, and look up sexual positions, you can look up drawings, and that might be more comfortable. There are some that are really like stick figures, and they won't be as descriptive. You want to see what your comfort level is. If you read some books that we have out there, I think Emily Nagoski's book, I've mentioned it a million times, called Come As You Are. She describes a few different positions. And that's what I've got. It's very specific what you're going to be comfortable with. So that's what I got for you right now.
I think one of the books that in the past we've recommended more frequently, although I think people still find it to be one of the best sources of information with regard to options, is The Joy of Sex. It has mostly drawings in it and very few photographs, and does go beyond issues of sexual positions to sexual options, which may be suitable for some couples. Again, I think we've been reiterating here the point that couples need to have a sense of what their own comfort zone is. And this book, I think, sort of mostly falls into a comfort zone for a couple that feel that their sex life is pretty good, moving along, and they'd like to add some spice to it. I think that's a good source for it. And if anyone's going to order a copy, they should order the most recent edition. Beyond that, there's websites I think are very good. We need to just warn people that it's very easy to click on the wrong button and get into information or get into visual options here that might make people feel uncomfortable. So, again, as Jody mentioned, be in touch with us. We can let you know where you can look that might be more suitable to the values people want to maintain in terms of their intimate life. Beyond that, I think any sexual health professional is available to you to be able to guide you in the directions that you may feel comfortable going in. We will take the time to know who you are. We will take the time to know where you've been and what each of you may want to look at in terms of some fantasy positions, fantasy images that may in fact enhance your sex life. So please don't hesitate to speak with us about this. It's not that we only deal with sexual dysfunctions. We are available to help people move along in their sex life as well, if they want to get some information about enriching that experience for each of them.
Yeah, we've gotten, actually, just to point out that it's been very refreshing during these webinars, how people have been calling and asking, even if it's just like to meet once, and then you just can help people that have a healthy sex life, that want to learn a little bit more, and just with a little bit of guidance, you can learn so much. But again, we want to be specific.
Lizzie, did you want to?
I don't have that much more to add. I think that, you know, everybody, you know, we have the Google at our fingertips, and we have, you know, Amazon and all kinds of books. And I think that there's just so many places today that people could look for, you know, tips. Again, I say that, you know, couples who are enjoy being with each other, again, will enjoy exploring each other and figuring out their own, you know, fantasies, and maybe figuring out some games to play together, or to order some toys online that would help them. I think that, you know, a couple that really is looking for something, that they'll find their ways to find it. And I urge you not to let it just sit there and what should we do, but to do something about it and go look.
Thank you. Okay. Here's one that just came in. I can't seem to find the G-spot. Can you explain where it is? Okay. Is there a good position that helps to find or access the, okay, fine. That's it.
Okay.
Who wants to do that one?
Well, let me just start with a piece of history, and that is the G stands for Grafenberg. And he was a researcher, a physician, gynecologist, who claimed that he was able to find a spot within the vaginal tract that allowed for a different kind or a different quality of pleasure. Subsequent to the publication of his article, there were many people who felt that he was way off the mark, and that he was creating an expectation that may not have any reality to it. And since then, articles have been published on both sides of the issue, and there is not a consensus about if the G-spot exists, and if it does exist, is it going to be a source of additional sexual pleasure? Well, that's just some historical background.
So I like to say that, just like David said, it is a controversial thing. No one has ever proved that there is a place like that, but it's worth checking out, and it's worth looking for it. You find it could be found inside the vaginal tract if a hand is put inside and does like a here come here movement, and I guess towards the back of the clitoris. The clitoris inside is like shaped like a wishbone. There's the clitoris that's on the outside, and then underneath is tissue. It's like shaped like a wishbone, so there's more pleasure to be had than that one spot. But the G-spot is supposedly right behind it, and some people feel like if they get pressure over there, that it feels very, very good, and maybe some people can even orgasm that way. Again, I'd like to say this sort of like the same thing. This is like a technical thing. It's not about if you don't find the G-spot. It doesn't mean there's something not normal about you. Many people can't find it. Many people do. And again, it's not a treasure hunt to look for it. It's just if it gives pleasure, it's one of those places. But our body, our skin is like the biggest sexual organ. The brain is the main sexual organ. The skin is the biggest sexual organ. I mean, I would say focus on touch and pleasure and sensations. And you know, G-spots are, for some people it's there, some people it's not. Anybody else?
I agree. There's not much more to say. It's the, you know, it's inserting the finger in the come hither motion. And again, if it's not there, I love that what you said, Lizzie, is it's not going on a treasure hunt. Maybe there are other areas intravaginally or extravaginally that are going to really do it for you, and you want to focus on the ones that are great. So explore. It's a controversial thing, so it doesn't mean that something's missing if you don't find it. It just means it may not exist, and it may not exist in your body, and you got other places. So I encourage exploration.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just reminding to people to just keep on sending in your questions. We are going to be addressing the questions that you send to us tonight, so feel free to send those questions to Dr. Naomi Grummet, who is the host. Let's continue on. Here's one that came from before, not on this session. I do not like mikveh night, since that means we cannot be spontaneous, and I have to perform that night. What is there to do? Dr. Ribner, do you want to start with that one?
I think, first of all, I think it's better. It seems to me that was written by a woman. I think one of my colleagues here should comment on the woman's perspective of that, and then I'll add on a man's perspective, also the notion of performance.
Okay, who wants to take that one?
I'll start. I think that, you know, mikveh night for so many women has just a lot of tension. You know, it shouldn't be that way, but it is, because we have kids and we have to get them to bed and we have to make food and we have to also get ourselves ready, and there's a lot of tension there, and it really is very, very helpful when the husband comes home early and takes care of things and gives the wife some space to do what she needs to do. But our lives are full of tension, and sometimes when we feel like we're forced to do something, like it makes us, well, we don't really want to do it, and I think that happens. And that is a normal feeling for many people. I think, you know, in order to enjoy yourself in bed with your spouse, you need to be relaxed, and you need to, you know, be able to take a sigh of relief, close the door, and that you're all, you know, it's just time for the two of you to be together. But there's a pressure on mikveh night, because, you know, you got to get there, you got to get to the mikveh, you got to get back, and you got to and then make sure that everything is okay, and then who knows what else has to be done. And I think that puts a pressure, but it can be worked out. I mean, thousands of people do work it out. I think the pressure to perform is because if someone's tired and if someone had a bad day, it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing to just shut everything off. So I understand the pressure that people are at. And I tell people, you know what, just cuddle, just get in bed, just cuddle, just relax. Sometimes, you know, that will just start the ball rolling. And if it doesn't roll that night, you can move on to the next night. You can't force anybody to do something that they can't do. I don't think for the woman has any performance. I mean, having pleasure is really up to her body to, if she can really just move into that zone from being, you know, rational and thinking about what's happening in the house, to just, I'm here now and I'm focusing on my spouse, and this is the place where I want to be. And then let's see what happens from there. I understand that there's pressure to have sex that night. I understand, but I think that people have to know that we're humans, and we have all kinds of pressures in our life, and we'll try our best, and that's what we're meant to do. Just try our best and see if we can get there. And if we can't, it's okay, honey. I'll see you tomorrow night.
Let me talk to two aspects. I think the question really asked about two different factors here. One is the notion of scheduled sex as opposed to spontaneous intimacy. I think people have a very difficult notion with regard to that it's more of a qualitative experience if it's spontaneous. I think anyone who has a house full of children knows that spontaneity is not always a possible factor in promoting sexuality, and that scheduling, in fact, may be something that allows for a better sense of timing and relaxation expectation for both couples. And maybe spontaneity needs to be held over for other occasions, like going on vacation. It doesn't mean that spontaneity is never available, but it doesn't necessarily mean that scheduled intimacy is going to be any less of a qualitative experience. The fact that our schedule with regard to Taras HaMishpacha encourages people to be together on mikveh night, I think has much that is in fact beneficial to it, in the sense of, you know, how do you begin again after you've been apart for 12, 14 days, however long it is that the couple is forbidden to touch each other. The build-up to mikveh night doesn't happen when the wife comes home from the mikveh and opens the front door. The build-up to mikveh night is something that should begin when Sheva Nekim starts. You know, when you know that you're counting down to a moment where both people may return to a level of enjoyment that they've had prior to this mikveh night. So I think that needs to be built into the process. This build-up is I think essential to making mikveh night more successful. However, just as performance issues are relevant for women, they are certainly relevant for men as well. Men also can come back from a long day, either at work or in the base medrash or whatever else their responsibilities may be. And the notion that they need to perform specifically, that they need to be able to get into bed with their wife and have an erection and be able to go through whatever the motions are to get through intercourse, that may be a sense of something which detracts from the desire of this man to be at that place at that moment. If there is a possibility for the couple to discuss what their day has been like before they get into bed with each other, and be clear with each other about what the expectations are, that will certainly go a long way to reducing any kind of frustration. Those kinds of question marks are aspects of negative influences on people's sexuality, and as much as possible, they should be avoided. And as we have continually said, almost every question, almost every night that we've been doing these webinars, there is no substitution for communication between these two people. And that will go a long way to dealing both with the notions of what the expectations are, the performance expectations, as well as the notion of, can we still have a really enjoyable time together, even though this is scheduled and not spontaneous.
Yeah, I just like to add a couple of things. First of all, it's so interesting because we have, the women's anxieties or stresses, and we have the men's anxieties and stresses. And the only way we're going to be able to do anything about that is when we discuss it with one another. I just finished doing some research on sort of like relaxation techniques for women during the Sheva Nekiim, because what I found in my practice, and I know a lot of my colleagues have found similar things, is that the Sheva Nekiim very often becomes a very tense time, because you're sort of not in the, in the beginning of Nida, and you're also, you're not permitted to one another. And sometimes there's this sense, and there's research done on this, some great research on, the fact that couples will sometimes sort of be avoidant of one another, or be avoidant of, sort of connecting and all the other types of intimacy that couples can connect in. And one thing you can look forward to, there will be a blog about this, but having some sort of a relaxation, I'm not thinking of the word, but to dedicate a certain time of day to just take like 5 minutes and just connect to for a woman's, that was my research, but also men, to connect to yourselves and to connect to what feels good for you, and to connect to your body and to connect to your desires, and recognize that right now you are asurim, and that's the halachic reality. And in 7 days, 6 days, 5 days, 4 days, you will be mutarim, and then you will be able to bring all of these feelings together into an intimate relationship. And then going to the mikvah, you're really preparing yourself emotionally also, not just physically. And I would love to hear if you guys sort of implement that. If you want more information on that, it's coming soon. But the Sheva Nekiim, like Dr. Ibner said, is a wonderful opportunity to connect to our own selves and to our bodies and to other types of intimacy with our spouse.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jody. Another question came in. Can you expand on the possibility for a woman to have an orgasm while the man is inside? And if you have any suggestions for this to happen. So I think this one really wants to know how to actually do it, not whether it's possible or not. So what do we think of that? Can we answer that?
I'll go first, so just real quickly. For some women, it's possible, right, to have a vaginal orgasm. Freud thought that was the ultimate in orgasms. We've proven him wrong since then. Any kind of orgasm is an orgasm, and that's great. Different positions will encourage that. A lot of times, in order for a woman to orgasm during penetration, there needs to be some sort of clitoral stimulation simultaneously.
I think just to take that to a step in terms of what expectations may be physiologically, and that the overwhelming majority of women will not have an orgasm unless there's clitoral stimulation, meaning if there's just vaginal penetration at this point, and the way bodies come together during intercourse, during penetration, there is less of a likelihood of there being clitoral stimulation, that shouldn't be an expectation. And when it doesn't happen, it doesn't mean that there is any kind of dysfunction or failure to be sensitive for one partner to the other. It just means that's what biology, that's what physiology dictates to us. And the more we have a sense of that, the more we can then adapt whatever we're doing with each other, so that both partners can be clear about what brings them to maximum pleasure and be able to be sensitive enough to help each other to get there. But I think the bottom line is that something, and it's way beyond 70% of all women will not be able to reach orgasm only through penetration. There will have to be some clitoral stimulation. I mean, there are positions, for example, a female on top position, where there's a possibility also of penetration as well as manual clitoral stimulation may in fact allow that to happen, may allow that the woman to feel that she's reached orgasm while her husband's penis is still inside of her, but it's going to be because of the manual stimulation and not because of the experience of intercourse.
I like to tell people that it takes someone who's very experienced to be able to manage that. Both sides have to really hold back until they're both almost ready, and then it's maybe possible. It's not necessary, not definitely, not 100%, but I think people can sort of synchronize when they know they're going to have one, and if they can hold back a little and then have penetration and then, you know, let go, then it could happen. But it really takes a lot of experience in knowing your body and knowing your spouse's body, and to synchronize that. And as everybody else said before, it really doesn't matter if it happens at the same time or not. The most important thing is that you were enjoying each other.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. One other thing that came in was the names of the books. People wanted to know so they didn't have to Google them. Dr. Ribner's first book is called The Newlywed's Guide to Intimacy. So that's a good book that you could buy. You don't have to Google it. You could type in The Newlywed's Guide to Intimacy. And his second book is I Am for My Beloved. So that's also a good book to go straight to. There's a website that is called Vahaftem. So that has a list of recommended books if people don't want to Google things. And also, once again, you can all contact the speakers on this webinar tonight, and they can give you more options and lists of things to look at, so you don't have to Google if you do not want to Google. Okay, here's another one that came in. What's the best way to help with religious guilt or shame with sexuality?
Whoa.
That's a good one.
Came in. You guys aren't prepared.
There isn't a button to press that takes away people's guilt. I mean, guilt is part of our experience. Somebody once said to me that guilt is just part of the human experience, and we just find different places to put it in the course of our lifetimes. So I think if someone is truly plagued by guilt, they really need to do some work with a professional to determine what's the source of that feeling. We know that there are a certain percentage of couples or you know, either husbands or wives who, because they've been hearing that something is forbidden for 20 years before they got married, have a difficult time from disconnecting from that message once they step out of the chuppah, and now, you know, it's not only mutter, it's a mitzvah. That transition is not easy for everyone. Okay, but most people seem to be able to do so within a reasonable period of time. If the guilt and shame is still there, then I think it really requires some professional intervention. Not necessarily a sex therapist. I mean, this might be something that's much more grounded in family dynamics issues or messages that have been heard from other sources. But there's no reason for people to suffer with that. There's no reason for them to have to carry it with them throughout their marriage.
Okay, thank you.
I think there's no such thing as religious guilt for, you know, the Torah tells us is not shy, and the Torah tells us everything. The Torah wants us to be together. All the sources, I mean, Judith, you know all the sources much better than I do. You know, if someone's feeling guilty about something, I don't think it's a religious thing. Maybe the messages that they got from their families or from their teachers were bad messages, you know, that this is not okay to think about it, this is not for you, this is nasty, I don't know, whatever messages they got. I think that's where they need to work on, like David said, with some sort of a family dynamics, you know, therapist, because it's not religious guilt. There's nothing there that we're all okay. It's something that Kadosh Baruch Hu, he comes into the bedroom. The Shekhinah is in the bedroom. He wants us to be together. Rabbis will do anything for us to be together. So I think that that person has guilt, for something, or that they learn to live with guilt for another thing, then they need to work on that. And not blame it on the religion. Our religion is very positive, for sexuality.
Okay.
I'd like to add a little bit about what I see sometimes is the collective subconscious, that so many of us sort of internalize these concepts about sex and sexuality, that there's something to be ashamed of or something to feel guilty about if you think about sex, or if even once it's permitted. And as Lizzie said, in Judaism, and I think we've all been saying this a lot, that in Judaism, when you really learn the content and you're open to really hearing what you're learning and really incorporating it, sex has a specific time and place in Judaism, just like so many things in our lives. And somehow so many of us have this underlying feeling of shame and guilt. Sometimes it's because of what we grew up with, like Lizzie said, in our families and like that. And sometimes it's like, I know people have said to me, I don't even know why I feel this way. I grew up in a very open household in terms of we talk about stuff. I don't know why I feel this way. And that's okay. We don't always have to know, as long as we're willing to explore. And sometimes, another question that's come up in the past is the pressure to be sexual, right? There are times that we feel, shame for being sexual, and then there's sometimes the other side, which is pressure to be and we see in movies very often, or TV shows or whatever, women talking about faking it. When Harry Met Sally, we brought that up. That's the ultimate example of faking orgasm. And sometimes women feel that they need to orgasm in order to finish up for the night, right? In order to say, okay. And this brings in a question of foreplay, which is a question I think that we've gotten also, in the past, about what does foreplay mean. And so often we associate foreplay as being before male orgasm. What about female orgasm? Does sex start and end with male orgasm? Does it start and end with female orgasm? It's really important to recognize that pleasure is what we're talking about, and orgasm is one type of pleasure, and it may be something that that's a goal sometimes, and it doesn't have to be all the time. So I'd really like to help sort of reduce that pressure when it comes to sexual, what the word we use is performance, when we're not performing, we're experiencing.
It's actually interesting. I'm just adding on to the question because something just came in, literally what you were speaking about, where it says, can you talk about the pressure a woman feels to try and achieve an orgasm and how that makes it difficult to be in the moment with her husband and just enjoy the process? So it's literally what you're just speaking about. Do you want to just further comment, or maybe one of the other speakers would like to comment on that? Lizzie, do you have a
question again? I just want to hear it.
Okay, sorry. So the question was, and this is literally a jumping off point from what Jody was discussing. It says, can you talk about the pressure a woman feels to try and achieve an orgasm and how that makes it difficult to be in the moment with her husband and just enjoy the process?
So you're saying that she feels pressure to have an orgasm?
Yeah.
And who's pressuring her? Herself?
Herself, it sounds like.
Yes, that's what it says.
Well, I think everybody, sort of wants when they get in there. I mean, not always does a woman feel like, there are many times women feel like, I don't have to have an orgasm. I'm just really tired. I'm here for you. I'm enjoying being together with you. And that's also fine too. We have to be real. Not ideally, it would be nice if every time both sides had orgasms, but we're people, and sometimes that doesn't happen. So I don't think anybody should feel pressure if they just are too tired or they can't, but they still want to be there in that place with their spouse. So I don't think anybody should pressure themselves. I think if nobody ever has orgasms, then they should think about, well, maybe they should go for some professional help, because that's what we do. We help people, in the bedroom, and to make it a better place for them. And that really is something that comes up often, that the pressure to have an orgasm and they don't have one. So that's something I would,
I think also what we're saying is that an orgasm is not the definition of a successful intimate experience. That may be a definition, but not the definition. And couples need to have some sense about what are the other options for sexual pleasure that don't necessarily include orgasm. And that's the matter of sort of disconnecting from what the main media message is that orgasms have to be an aspect of everyone's sexual experience. And perhaps not even one orgasm, maybe multiple orgasms. And there's all kinds of pseudo techniques for people to reach more than one orgasm, particularly if they don't want to. But so what we're saying here is that, expand your repertoire, expand your expectations. Learn to have pleasure, not just defined as an orgasm, but in ways that allow you to feel that when you wake up the next morning, you can really smile at each other and remember a really very positive night a few hours earlier. That's really what we're looking for.
Very nice. Thank you. There are some more questions that came in. I'm just going to also shoot through some normal questions that came in. How many times a week is it normal to be having sex?
As many times as it feels right for you.
Okay.
I have been teaching sex therapy for many years. And one of the first lessons that I tell all of my students is that they need to take the word normal out of their vocabulary when discussing anything with regard to human sexuality. And I think it's been mentioned by my colleagues earlier this evening and in previous webinars that we're not talking about normal, we're talking about mutual pleasure. And whatever couples want to do with each other that brings them to that point, that for them is appropriate. Whether or not it matches anything in good housekeeping is irrelevant. We want people to be able to know that they need to do this exploration for themselves, find out who they are as sexual beings, what they could do to give each other a sense of satisfaction in this area, and forget about the word normal. It's just damaging when discussing anything with regard to human sexuality.
That's a good answer, although the next couple of questions have the word normal in them. So.
Wait, 1 second. It sounds to me like when someone asks that question, they're really asking, because we get this all the time, that one partner wants it more often than the other. And I want it 3 times a week, and you only want it 1 time a week, or I want it 5 times a week, you only want it 2 times a week. And then they wonder, like, what's normal? Is one normal that they want it 5 times a week, and the other one only wants it 2 times a week? And that is a very normal question for people to ask. And I think that the answer is, again, in consent and negotiation. A couple needs to negotiate this and to figure out what's happening in their life. Why, if one feels that they need more, what's going on? Is it, if one person is tired, is the other person considerate of that? And couples need to figure this out. But there isn't a number that's the answer. It's they have to figure out what's either, come to some sort of happy medium between the two of them. And there are different times in people's lives where, they have more libido and less libido. So we have to take that into consideration, what time of the month it is. The week after mikvah, usually women have higher estrogen. They probably have more libido. As they get close to the period, they may have less. Some women have more. I don't know. I think, there's just so many different factors that go into it. That's why we don't have a number.
Okay, but the next question is about a normal. How long is it normal? Like, what is the normal that it takes to orgasm? How long does it take to orgasm?
Okay, we can't talk about normal, we can talk about average. Okay, and I think before we begin to use any numbers here, it's important to realize that average means that there are going to be lots of people at one end of that spectrum and lots of people on the other end of the spectrum. So there is no normal, but there are averages. And I don't think it's necessarily relevant in numbers here. What's relevant is, first of all, yes, it will probably take women longer to reach orgasm once clitoral stimulation or vaginal stimulation begins than it will take for a man once there's stimulation of his penis. So it will take longer, and I think everybody who's had any sexual experience recognizes that. That changes over the course of a week, a month, a lifetime. Those numbers may not necessarily be relevant. And then what's important here is that both couples really feel that they're able to reach a level of sexual satisfaction that allows them to feel comfortable with what they're doing. If there is a problem with sexual satisfaction, because it takes too long or it takes too short, then that's something to discuss with a sexual health professional. Right? It's only if couples are unhappy with what's going on that we would even bring this as a potential issue for our attention. If whatever time it takes for either the woman to reach orgasm or the man to reach orgasm is satisfactory to both people, then it's certainly irrelevant in terms of the actual numbers that we're talking about here.
Okay, thank you. Another question that came in was, I'll take out the normal part of it, but a woman asked about having multiple orgasms. Is it normal? How does she go about and get multiple orgasms?
It could be normal for you if you have them, and that's fantastic. If you don't have multiple orgasms, then you enjoy the one that you have, or you enjoy the sexual experience that you're having. There are techniques to try to achieve multiple orgasms. For some women, those techniques are really helpful. There's something called edging, which is sort of like postponing a full-blown orgasm, so you have lots of little minis before you have the big one, and some people love that. Some people may feel that they end up losing their full-blown orgasm when they sort of postpone it. And that's, this is what we're talking about when we talk about experimentation. I've had people speak to me about, women that come and say, well, after I orgasm 3 times, then my husband orgasms, and then I want another one or something like that. And I've heard that, I think we've all heard things like that. And other people say, my husband orgasms, and then it really takes a long time until and all of that is fine. Multiple orgasms can be wonderful, and single orgasms can be wonderful. Specific techniques, you can experiment with yourself, together with your spouse, and you can sort of play around with it and see what you experience personally. Again, one person may, 2 people may have a very similar experience, and one of them will say, I had 4 orgasms, and another one will say, I was building up to a really, one really big orgasm.
Okay. Here's a longer one that just came in. What would you say to someone who says sex is pleasurable but unexciting? Lizzie, do you want to start with this one? What would you say to someone who says sex is pleasurable but unexciting?
Wow. My first feeling when I hear that question is like I feel really bad for them. That it's unexciting. I wonder what's happening in the relationship there, that maybe they do need a little bit spicing up, or maybe they do need a little bit of conversation about what's happening. Sometimes it's because maybe they're doing the same thing, or maybe they're not exploring. I think the body reacts and gets pleasure because that's our physiology, but the exciting part is more a mental thing, and it's a good question. I think there's something going on in the relationship, or the way they're, doing foreplay, or something's missing, and I would probably, have to explore that with them and see why is it not exciting. Sometimes there's people who are just not very excitable also. But if it's bothering her, so then I have to explore it. I mean, I don't have a better answer than that. Sometimes you just have to sit with someone and figure it out.
It may not be a her who asked that question, it may be a him who asked that question, and I think that he would need to hear that sex does not necessarily always have to be exciting, and can have other kinds of pleasure that the couple may share with each other. It can be grounding, it can be it can enhance the trust that they have between the two of them. It can give them a sense of security. It can function in many different ways. If I think, as Lizzie is concerned about here, that it's never exciting, then yes, probably we should want to talk with these people. But if the complaint here is that sometimes it's not exciting, but it's mostly time pleasurable, maybe we just need to do some reality check with this person in terms of what's appropriate to expect from a long-term sex life. Yes, we would like to be exciting as much as possible, but it may have at different times in a person's life other kinds of purposes, and those are equally valid.
I think also, just to add in there, I think that it's also, I would ask the couple about what time and energy they're placing into their sexual life, right? Are they coming into this life at the, they're starting their sex life at 11 o'clock at night when they're both passed out and they're both like really not into it. And then, okay, so it's pleasurable, but there's nothing exciting. Exciting is what you plan of it. I don't know. I tell my kids that all the time, right? They're bored. They don't know what to do. Well, how much energy did you put into planning whatever you're doing? And I think that part of that excitement is based on you. I turn it back to you. What have you done to make it exciting?
Also, what does it mean to have exciting sex, right? Does that feel good for you? Do you, is it something that you fantasize, you think about having exciting sex, but it sort of doesn't fit with what you feel you can bring to sexuality? Like, what does it mean? I would really want to ask this person, like, where else in your life do you feel excitement? Right? Are there other things, not talking about sex, talking about, well, we always talk about food. Food always comes up, right? When you see some like delicious whatever coming out of the oven, do you get excited about it? Like when you're going to visit someone, do you get excited about it? What does excitement feel like? Because a lot of times feelings of excitement can also feel like feelings of stress, because our heart is pumping, our blood is flowing, and how do we differentiate the two? So what does it feel like to feel excited? Where else in your life do you feel excited? And can you identify those sensations during sex?
Okay, thank you. I want to thank all of our speakers for their time. We've heard of a lot of experiences, ideas, and suggestions, which we hope will be helpful. We want to remind everyone that there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all solution. Individuals or couples are not alone, and we've encouraged to seek assistance from professionals when the situation warrants. We have all had our challenges and have come out stronger because of them. We wish everyone continued health and look forward to seeing you in our next session, which is on, one second, what date is our next one? Someone say it out loud. Thank you.
I think it's August 6th.
Thank you. August 6th is our next session, so please feel free to do that. One last comment is the webinars are only possible with your support. Please consider donating any amount to theedencenter.com/donate. It's up there, theedencenter.com, donate. All of the speakers, all the therapists here on the webinar have the possibility of you meeting them privately or speaking to them. Their numbers, phone numbers, emails are all listed on the next screen. Oh, that's our webinar, the next screen. So feel free to contact them. Okay, have a good night, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.
Thank you for coming.
Bye-bye.